Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. The question on my mind right now is who is looking out for, in fact, who is fighting for Idaho students? Now, I know on the one hand, well, the legislature is, and the Republican Party, and parents and teachers. And yes, there are also some people out there fighting for Idaho students who you may not realize are fighting for them. And, well, frankly, they shouldn't be having access to Idaho students in the first place. Details are coming up.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Now, when it comes to Idaho students, I know that the education budget is one of the biggest parts of the state's budget. We spend a lot of money on education. The problem is that some people have seen education as a kind of a captive audience and have tried to use this as an opportunity to force things on kids that really are pretty questionable. What kind of things? Well, if you attended the No Kings protest, you probably saw a few of their booths around, whether it was the Communist Party USA or whether it was just, the latest LGBT club or fad, being played out. But the bottom line is, Idaho students in some ways, they're not as protected as we think. In fact, I want to share with you a story here. This is from Idaho News. I believe it's Channel 2 out of Boise. 66 school districts in Idaho are not in compliance with state law. Can you guess which state law they're not in compliance with? If you were to say, Brian, I'm guessing it's probably the one that is designed to keep LGBT materials and discussions out of the classroom, you would be absolutely right. And this is a story that was first broken by Idaho Ed News first, reporting that 66 districts in Idaho are not in compliance with state law under House Bill 352. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all violating it. What it just simply means is they're not bothering to comply with it. So what good is a law if there's no mechanism to make sure that they're complying? If you remember, HB 352 passed last session and was actually signed into law by Governor Little following an executive order signed by President Trump in January to end radical indoctrination in K through 12 schooling. Okay, well, HB 352 aims to remove the conversations of sexual orientation and gender ideology from classrooms, according to the bill's co-sponsors, Dale Hawkins and Senator Cindy Carlson. So that's fine. But Senator Carlson says, look, school districts have to comply with Idaho laws. And those that fail to comply with House Bill 352 need to be penalized financially. And the reasoning here, I think, is the soundest reason for this. This is not, conservatives making trouble where there was none. Parents should never fear that their children will be exposed to age-inappropriate gender ideology in public school classrooms. This is from Senator Carlson. Noncompliance in this case appears to reference a district that hasn't filed a corresponding action plan for how it will comply. Now, here's the interesting thing about it is, the state superintendent's office was contacted for the news story and asked why are more than 60% of Idaho's school districts not in compliance with this new law. And a spokesman for Debbie Critchfield's office said, well, the superintendent's role is to ensure that every school knows what the law requires and has the guidance they need to comply. However, implementation, they tell us, rests with local districts and charters. Does that seem like a sidestep to you? That seems like a sidestep to me. Well, we're just here to make sure that they know what the law requires and they have the guidance they need to comply, but whether or not they comply, well, we don't really care. That seems kind of an odd stance to take, particularly when it comes to charged issues like who's teaching my kids, this LGBT stuff. Now, CBS 2 first reported when HB 352 was enacted that some Idaho lawmakers expressed confusion over how this law was to be implemented and how exactly to enforce it without any enforcement mechanisms. And actually, that is a fair question and probably something we should be keeping in mind whenever any law or policy is created. Number one, you don't create a policy without some kind of an enforcement mechanism. Secondly, if it's important enough to create an enforcement mechanism, we better make sure it's actually important enough to justify that, because it would be a shame to start using enforcement mechanisms for things that maybe don't require it. That's as clear and at the same time as vague as I'm going to be. Let's go back to the story here and talk a little bit about, you know, this would be one thing if Idaho students were performing at the level they're supposed to be performing. I mean, then we'd have time to focus on extracurricular stuff. However, Idaho's student proficiency rates in language arts and math have actually been declining for several years. And this is not new. We've told you about this many times before. Only 47% of students are proficient in language arts. Only 42% are proficient in math. And State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield, attributes those trends to various factors, including changes since the COVID-19 pandemic, saying, well, I hate to take everything and roll it up into COVID, but we can't talk about some of these changes without talking about that. Now, this also is an attempt to duck responsibility, and that, well, of course, we have to blame COVID if we're going to blame anything, but let's take a little bit deeper look at what Superintendent Critchfield is talking about. Yes, COVID-19 school closures certainly affected students, and the lasting impact is still relevant in classrooms across the country, but the state proficiency exams have shown a decline for nearly 2 decades. That didn't start with COVID. COVID just made a problem that was already taking place worse. And those numbers compared with the same test in the 2009 to 2010 school year show a significant decline from 72% proficiency in language arts and 77% in math. Now, the article tells us that an audit of proficiency exams in Utah, Oregon, and Washington showed similar results. So if there's some good news from this, it's that Idaho isn't truly alone, but Critchfield emphasized the importance of better preparation for teachers and improving curriculum choices. Now, I'm sorry, it's going to sound like I'm nitpicking or I'm bagging on her, but where is really the solution? Or where is the commitment to finding what the problem is? She's just kind of floating ideas here. Well, the next question to ask is, what are the materials? What's the curriculum going into the classrooms? Efforts to enhance reading skills through phonics instruction for younger students have shown significant gains in the past 2 years. I expect on our statewide assessments, we're going to see some growth now. Why hasn't there been growth for the past couple of decades, though? Why has there been a decline? See, we're not getting those answers, and I'm sorry to be a stick in the mud for this, but this is one of the reasons why school choice is such an important matter. So the article from idahonews.com says, while focusing on improving reading scores, Critchfield is also addressing challenges in math education, saying, I think the first part of talking about improving student outcomes around math is to articulate a clear vision. Okay, but how do we understand whether or not they're proficient in math? Besides the clear vision, can we see how is that proficiency supposed to come up? Well, despite the overall proficiency rates, Critchfield highlighted success stories. In other words, other than the Mrs. Lincoln, how was the show? Okay, well, the good news is Idaho's public schools have students graduating with 2-year degrees or certifications like an EMT or CDL certification, which enables them to enter the workforce immediately. That's wonderful. But what about the proficiency? Okay, again, this is the elephant in the room, and it's not going to go away quickly. The goals for proficiency in Idaho are set by the State Board of Education. Debbie Critchfield serves on that board, and she stressed the importance of setting measurable and achievable targets for student outcomes. Now, I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. Is that supposed to mean that anything that's not set within their current parameters is somehow pie in the sky? I guess the big question that I have is, at what point do we start to look at the problem, which is declining proficiency, and start to figure out why that's happening? Okay, I mean, figuring out how to fix it, that's part of it too, but why is it happening? See, school choice could provide some answers to this, if for no other reason through competition that would then bring, the people who are doing the things that work best would be copied. The people who were doing the worst things would, learn to discard those so that they could remain competitive, at any rate. One final thing that I wanted to get on your radar screen. I know that we're interested in seeing how our money is spent. The budget, the Idaho state budget is in trouble. And for the next couple of years, our legislature is going to have a very difficult time sorting out a mess that was actually many years in the creation. But at the local level, this matters as well. So it's not just the big picture, what's the legislature going to vote on? What's JFAC going to do? It's also a matter of holding your government accountable right down at the local level. And to that end, if you go to the Idaho Freedom Foundation website, idahofreedom.org, you will find there's a new tab there for local government and a chance for you to be the eyes and ears and the watchful citizenry that is making sure that our tax dollars are being used wisely, making sure that government entities, whether they be schools or whether they be, municipal offices, Mayor McLean, looking your direction, are following the law as intended. And it's also to be, better informed, as far as what policies may be needed at the local level. Anyway, I encourage you, check it out for yourself. You will find that there's a wealth of resources, and there's a lot of people who care a lot about what's going on here who are willing to go to bat for you. Check it out at idahofreedom.org. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this